Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I chat with successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Today's episode is brought to you by Claire CFO Group. Claire CFO is a fractional CFO agency dedicated to supporting growing B2B service companies. If you're looking to uplevel the financial strategy and leadership in your business, visit clairecfo.com to learn more. So I was introduced to today's guest from one of our regular listeners, Josh Heisengay. So Josh, if you're listening on your walk, thanks so much for the intro. I know sometimes you've told me that you listen on your walk, so very happy to have your introduction today. So that's an encouragement to listeners who have a guest that you think might be a really good person for the podcast. Please just reach out to me and let me know. Thank you, Josh, for introducing me to Sanjit. So today's guest is Sanjit Singh. Sanjit is an experienced Fractional Chief Revenue Officer, also called a CRO, who specializes in helping B2B companies accelerate revenue growth and establish scalable and repeatable sales models. Before becoming a fractional CRO, Sanjit co-founded and led several companies, most notably LeadCrunch, which is an AI marketing startup based in San Diego. Under his leadership, LeadCrunch raised $18 million in funding and grew to a $24 million run rate with 60 employees before he successfully exited the company. Sanjit, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, and shout out to my friend Josh.
Yeah. Josh runs a branding and marketing agency. So, well, mostly branding, but he is fantastic. And I met him through EO, and you met him through a different business networking group.
Advisors. Yeah, that's right.
Advisors. Great. So just a reminder to people to stay networked and find the right groups for you. So, well, Sanjit, I would love to hear further about how you got to a place of running your own business.
Oh, just running this business or just in general?
Yeah. Well,
my first business.
You started in this like startup world, or, you were in this startup world and growing companies and, leaving that and starting your own thing to be this fractional leader. I'm just kind of curious of your journey and
the transition between those two. Yeah. So I started my first business in 2007 after finishing business school while working. Then I had already laid plans to start that business, which was in the transportation and logistics industry. But then, a number of years later, when I was running a startup, I was just, it was an insane amount of work. I got really burned out. And so after exiting that company, I was actually thinking about doing another software startup, and I spent some months working on that. And, and I was kind of going back and forth and, what does the market look like? And I was doing all my research. And then, I was feeling still pretty burned out. And then I started getting calls from all my other friends who were founders to help them with sales and marketing. And so I said, you know what, maybe I'll just do this for a while. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. And I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's really been fun.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, that seems almost like an accidental entrepreneur. You're like, I guess I'm consulting enough that this makes sense to keep doing it. So that's great. I love that. And so in your company right now, is it just you? Do you have anybody else working for you? Like, what is that?
Yeah, it's mostly me. I don't like to do, grunt work and charge my customers my rate for the grunt work. So I have, folks that help me with that. But other than that, I don't have employees or, a big giant payroll or anything anymore.
Yeah, that's nice. Takes a lot of the pressure off, I'm sure.
It does. 100%.
So can you explain to us what is a chief revenue officer? And, I know a lot of our audience might be familiar with the term chief financial officer, but let's get clear on what that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you could think of me as, a part-time head of sales and marketing that helps grow revenue for a company. The word fractional obviously means part-time, and the chief revenue officer attempts to communicate, like a senior level of experience in growing revenue. It's a little bit, it's different from a chief marketing officer, even though they have similar responsibilities. a chief marketing officer would certainly have a deeper marketing expertise than I would, but often doesn't own revenue and doesn't have business development or sales skill sets in their background. So that would be kind of differentiating those two.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And probably, I mean, you're bringing a lot more of the actual strategy to the table, maybe more so than anybody who would be in like the accounting side of things, or, I mean, potentially, I mean, marketing has a lot of strategy associated as well, but I imagine like really thinking through, how, like who we should go after for more revenue, how to multiply things, which industries to target. Is that all kind of underneath that revenue?
Yeah, that would be those things you mentioned would be very similar for a CRO and a CMO. But if it comes to, I think one of the questions that I wish would get asked more by certainly in particular by startups, but certainly other companies as well, is which growth engines should we pursue? Like, for example, there was one startup I was working with. They were, the CEO was a former Navy SEAL. They were all ex-Special Forces. And they were doing a security business for companies. And they were stuck at like 200K, ARR. And they were just slogging away trying to do cold calls and do sales. And I said, well, I think it might be a better approach to do a business development strategy here. Let's go talk to some potential sales channel partners. And I said, I think you're in the risk reduction business. Why don't we go talk to insurance brokerages? And we were able to partner with a number of them. And in 10 months, we grew to 1.3 million ARR.
Wow.
So a lot of times that question doesn't get asked, and it doesn't get asked because usually the person that's trying to grow the revenue, often the founder or CEO, until they have more team members, they just don't ask that question, and they may not even know what other methods they should consider outside of maybe, well, we do SEO and that's it, and even within marketing, there's a tremendous number of options. And then outside of marketing, you have business development and you have sales. So that's something I wish would get asked more or get more attention.
That's really good. Yeah. And I think sometimes like when you're just working in the business, you're so focused, you are the leader, you kind of are seeing it one way. So bringing somebody else in to really, even like you said, like see a different perspective and say, well, really, like this is what you're selling. Maybe it's not what you think you're selling. In some ways, like having somebody kind of help you reposition that, and then identifying opportunities. That's really cool. So like, I think you kind of alluded to this, but like if a business is not yet big enough to maybe need even a fractional CRO or something like that, that responsibility tends to fall on the business owner typically, like that sales growth, sales strategy. That's usually the CEO that's holding that responsibility, right?
Yeah. It's when in doubt, it'll always be the CEO or founder, president, co-founder. But if they have revenue people in the company, either sales or marketing or business development, then it could be that one of them owns it, but ultimately the CEO owns it. But the thing is, other than a CRO, usually, a CMO for good reason may not own revenue. Often doesn't. Even the head of sales may not own revenue. Sometimes you have a head of sales and a head of marketing in a bigger company. That can get really messy. It's not that you shouldn't have a head of sales and a head of marketing. It's that if you don't have somebody to coordinate both of those, sometimes they have different KPIs that they worship.
Yeah.
And sometimes they, like a common one is the sales leader will say that the marketing team is bringing in a bunch of leads that are no good. And the marketing team will say, well, these are our ideal profile. Maybe the sales team isn't doing a good job closing and they want to blame it on someone. That's not always the case, but if there is some tension between the two teams, that's a common kind of thing you might run across. Whereas a CRO can understand both, and you don't have that problem because they own it and they have to solve it, instead of the CEO or founder trying to solve it, and they may not have enough expertise in sales and marketing to really know how to solve it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like they could have maybe gotten a business to a certain point, but to kind of start unlocking other opportunities or really starting to like scale, like to be able to do something at scale that might need a different skill set than what that CEO brought to the table with them when they first came in. So I'm curious, like when are people calling you for CRO services? Like, are there some triggers, common triggers and stuff that would call somebody or somebody would want to reach out and hire somebody like you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's I don't want to oversimplify it, but there are people either they're just not growing, either they're not growing fast enough, or they're smart enough to know that even though they're starting to gain some momentum, like if they're early stage, they know that they don't have these skill sets and they know that they don't know how to scale it. Like I called three people I knew that were CEOs and sold them deals, like maybe small enterprise deals. But I know that's not repeatable and scalable. So if they're smart enough to understand that, then they may start looking around for someone like me or another revenue type of professional. The largest client I had was about 50 million and their largest division was just flat. And that was obviously totally unacceptable to them. So they couldn't figure it out. So they called me and there was a lot of things I had to work on with them, but about a year later, we were at 70 plus million. So there was it was an unusually complicated business for that size. So there was a lot of things we had to address, but yeah, people are either flat with their revenue or they know they can't meet expectations based on their own knowledge, or they're not trending to meet those expectations. And so that's when they reach out.
Okay. Have you, I mean, I imagine you kind of run into a number of things in this role. I mean, do you run into, almost like a product market fit where people just, where you might have to even say like, hey, this is just not it. People don't want to buy this thing that you created.
The market's just not that into you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
How do you know if that is the case or if there is like a true problem that you can help fix?
That's a great question. And my first assumption with an early stage company that's not growing is that is the issue. And almost always it is. If the exception to that would be, we have some, 2 or 3 really good proof of concepts going on with good, solid customers. They're going well, then maybe it's not the case. But if they're just really, really struggling, then it's either they don't have product market fit, or they're targeting the wrong segment, or they've decided on a beachhead that either doesn't have authority or doesn't have money, like they don't have the authority within their company. Like for example, they're targeting the HR leader who doesn't have a ton of, they can't just pull the trigger on really expensive things that they think are great. They have to go through a lot of other channels. Whereas if they're targeting the CFO who loves what they're doing, that's much, much easier to pull through. Or they're targeting like, we're selling to schools during COVID, and the schools are panicking and cash strapped, and so it could be the market. They're targeting the beachhead. It could be the product's just not that exciting, or it doesn't really help solve problems that are really vexing to the audience. So it could be a number of things, but all those things usually fall under product market fit in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Do you work a lot of times with like software type companies, physical products, services? What's kind of the sweet spot for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed quite a bit. I should say it's changed in terms of, I used to work with a lot more early stage companies. Now I work with a little bit later stage, as I work with anyone. It's B2B that's under 30 million, where most of my customers are. But man, I mean, I've had a surprising breadth of things that I've done. Certainly a lot of technology, but financial services, even consumer products, where we're doing wholesaling. I'm actually working with a customer that's selling consumer products in Mexico. And, but it's still B2B because we're selling to the chains and the e-commerce platforms and so on. But yeah, so I've had quite a variety. But I would say B2B is under 30 million is very much a sweet spot for me.
So I'm kind of curious about how you see kind of companies in their business development, and where maybe, because you come in kind of as maybe a little bit of a fixer in some ways.
Yeah, very much
people are
so.
not calling you when they have great sales and everything's going wonderfully, and like it's all all going really well. But business development in B2B companies is a big thing. And I find that a lot of service companies aren't doing a great job in business development. So,
Yes.
what common problems are you seeing, or maybe some things, maybe some tips that you can provide to businesses who are, struggling in that area and they'd like to start practicing, some better systems or something on the sales side?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. One of them we already talked about, which is if you're just doing sales and you're not really focusing on marketing. I mean, marketing is where you get the leads that you actually start doing sales calls. Or you're doing a ton of marketing and you're not thinking about referrals or business development so that is a revenue engine. Those are revenue engine choices. Usually that's not where I start. We get there pretty quickly, but where I like to start is with the fundamentals before we get to the revenue engine, which is if I look at someone's website, and this is very relevant. In fact, I gave a presentation this morning to a group of service providers, and if I go to their website, above the fold, without scrolling down, just the top of the website, I'm looking for three things. What do they do? Who do they do it for? And what's the call to action? Like, if I was interested, what would I click on? What's the next step? Those should be crystal clear, and very often are not. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second is, can we simplify the messaging? Usually there's a lot of jargon. Something seems complicated, too much text. How do we simplify this, make it look appealing, imagery? And I'm not just talking about the website. This will whatever we do as far as cleaning up positioning like this, will go across your website, LinkedIn, other socials. It should be consistent across. Your sales and marketing material should all and the other thing that that the positioning should do is differentiate. Okay, so if you say, let's say I'm a lawyer, a business lawyer. Okay, great. There's a lot of business lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm a business lawyer that gives great service. Wonderful. Everybody says that. That still doesn't help me if I'm shopping for a lawyer, right? So how do you differentiate? You could certainly the obvious ways, right? Well, I focus on this industry, or I, whatever, right? You have some niche, you have some focus. That's good. I would say the best thing to do outside of those obvious things are, and this is quite a concept, just talk to your customers, do customer interviews, you'll learn so many nuances if you just pretend that you're like, hey, you know what? When you approached me, tell me in your own words what problem you had. Not in my words, the lawyer. The lawyer's going to have a whole different way of looking at it. Tell me in your words what problem you had. What options or alternatives did you consider? Why did you choose me? What was was it just I was personable? You liked me? You liked my haircut? You really thought I understood your issues? You felt I had specific expertise in your area? Like, what was, we're going to let the customer say it in their words. If they don't, maybe we'll prompt them with those things, but we try to get them to say it. Open-ended questions first.
Yeah.
And then what you get back, you can, if you record it like we're doing now, you have a video testimonial. Yeah. You can parlay into a case study. And then once you start hearing from a number of your customers, now you're seeing patterns in what they're saying. And you say, you know what? These are actually my differentiators, right? And you can then craft your website and all these platforms to reflect why you're different. And then once I'm in a conversation, again, I'm a lawyer. I'm in a conversation with a prospective client, and I will ask them sales questions like, what other alternatives are you considering? Oh, I'm considering this, this, and this. Okay, let me tell you why I'm differentiated. Because based on the needs that you had, it sounds like I would be a better fit because of these things. Sometimes we assume that the prospect will be able to figure that out. I think it's better that we ask and actually explain to them why we're better. So these are the kinds of like really fundamental things I like to clean up. The other big one before I get to revenue engine is what's their ideal customer? Sometimes, most of the time people think they know, and we're not wrong, but it may not be precise. They may be off a little bit. So I think the best thing to do, I say, put all your customers in a spreadsheet and then put how much revenue each customer gives you. And then put any pattern, any like data on those customers. Like if our customers are companies, okay, what industry, how big are they, et cetera, right? If they are and then who was the buyer at that company? What was their title? All that kind of stuff. If they were targeting consumers, then we say, well, what's the, age, all the, persona graphics or demographics of that, age, what type of needs do they have? What sort of, is it mostly male, female, whatever your demographics are. And then we look for patterns to determine, do we have one ideal customer or a few ideal segments? Now, once we really dial that in, because you and I talked earlier before we even started recording about like the idea of, are we attracting the right prospects that are a good fit for us?
Yeah.
Well, if we know this stuff, we know let's say we have 3 segments. We go, okay, these are the 3 ideal customer segments. These are the needs with precision. It completely changes the way we write our website or rewrite our website so that we are now optimized we're attracting the kind of leads we want instead of, being a little bit off. You can see how you're going to attract. And if you are attracting a bunch of the wrong leads, then I think this is a very valuable exercise because the way the world looks at us is maybe different than the way we look at us. You can even, I've done things like you copy your whole homepage, stick it in AI and say, what kind of company is this? And see what AI thinks you are.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, that's funny. And I've done this and it's been completely off, and I've done this and it's like, oh my gosh, that's spot on what we're trying to communicate. Great. We're now communicating exactly what we want to the target audience that we want.
Yeah. Ooh, that's humbling. Like I'm thinking about that right now. That would be, we actually just went through a positioning kind of process with we had a positioning consultant on the podcast a couple months ago, Lynn Revest. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that and dive a little deeper into positioning, it's this huge, so important, like before marketing, before even really, talking about yourself, like really thinking about how you want to be, how you want to be perceived in the minds of your customer. So we have just gone through that, and we haven't updated all of our website and everything yet. And that's like been one of the things that we've noticed is the leads coming into the business are all over the place. And, we're lucky enough to have a very big marketing reach because we have the YouTube channel, which has a pretty big reach. But with that, if we're not very specific and our videos are very broad, we're getting tons of leads, but they're like all over the place. They're restaurants, they're trucking companies, they're real estate companies, they're, Bitcoin mining companies. That was the latest one that came in. And I was like, all these, might really need a true like CFO or something, but that's just not, who we're trying to serve. And we're trying to have like a consistent, repeatable process over here. So very, very important. That makes sense. I know we were kind of on the business development track, so I kind of derailed us a little bit, but yeah, I just want to reiterate the importance of positioning. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I like this. I like to think of it like this. Like, okay, let's say you scrape together, we're going to $5,000. We're going to do this amazing marketing campaign. Well, if your positioning's off, that's a waste of money. And that's why I start there. I mean, I always like to say, if I bake a cupcake and it's terrible, I don't want to bake 100 more. That's for sure, right? And so yeah, if the fundamentals are off, everything we do later becomes wasteful and, inefficient. And, and depending on the business you're in, I mean, if a lot of them are service people or service providers, maybe this is a little bit less true, but but in most businesses, the efficiency of the funnel is really critical. The customer acquisition cost, right? First of all, if you're attracting the right kind of customers, you get a higher revenue per customer, right? High customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
Which is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, what does it cost me to get a customer? And I want the lifetime of a customer to be worth a lot more, like at least 3 times more than how much it costs me to get that customer. Mm-hmm. And you want things that are scalable, predictable, which, like referrals are awesome. It's the best thing you can do is ask all your customers for referrals, network, and get referrals from, your network. But that's not, it's not infinitely scalable. It's hardly scalable, right? And so, like, for example, if you're trying to 2x your business, right? For example, you can't count on 2x referrals unless you're really going to get out there. I guess the question is, if you double your networking efforts, do you really truly expect to double your referrals? And if so, do it. If not, let's talk about other methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just talking to my co-owner, and I was saying like that I don't feel like I have that lever in the CFO business right now. That's like yes, I can like turn it on. It's not like a product business where maybe like, oh, I'm just going to throw more money at ads and
Right.
increase sales. So I'm curious, in service businesses, like, do you see any of those levers that people aren't pulling? And like, are there any kind of obvious things that we haven't talked about?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, the biggest issue I see is service providers like you and I mean, service providers, often feel like I don't know how to do marketing. I hate marketing. I hate sales. I don't have time for it. And those are like the 3 biggest gripes I hear. And I get it. I mean, I get it that there's things I hate doing in the business, but, I either got to do them or I got to find someone else to do them. And if I don't have time, I got to find out. I mean, we are living in the golden age of AI and automation. If there's things you're doing that you can automate or have AI do or delegate, you got to free up time and focus on growing your business. If you feel like you need to grow, you're not on track, you got to find a way to get time to do it. It's really important.
Yeah. What about I like doing it. I like talking to people. I actually like the marketing parts. What I find is that I could spend time doing things like maybe I'm increasing my number of like strategic partner calls or something every month, like where I'm saying, oh, maybe I've identified these bookkeepers or other fractional leaders, or trying to think of like, HR type partners, IT partners, other type of service providers that might be adjacent to potential clients.
That's smart.
Those types of things would be people that I would, reach out to. I can spend my time doing that, but that is even like a long tail kind of action, right? Like, it's not like I'm going to have a call with somebody and then all of a sudden I'm going to get a lead,
Sure.
So
so that's a referral strategy, and it's a partner strategy. If you look for more of a sales channel partner strategy, like a sales channel partner that's ideal already has the customers that we want. They have a lot of customers that we want, and they would love to be able to offer another service and monetize one more thing. And so the idea is, well, if there's a kind of company that has a lot of the population you're looking to serve, then if you offer your services through them, they sell it for you, they bring you customers, you pay them. That's a sales channel partnership. That's, really ideal. You need to structure it right, which is a whole other conversation. So that's the revenue engine. And the other engine is our major engine is marketing. These just to get leads in the door. Then sales is the third marketing engine. So marketing there's so many things you can do. There's a book called Traction by Justin Mares. There's a few books called Traction. It's the one by
I know.
Justin
I was
Mares.
going to say, wait, this is
Yeah.
not the one.
It's not not that one. Yeah, I've read both of them.
Not that one. Not the one we're
Not
talking
that
about.
one.
We talked about
But he
that in the
talks,
last couple episodes.
yeah. So he talks about this, like what are all the different ways you can grow in marketing? But the big ones are, you can reach out on LinkedIn, you can reach out on email, you could do ads. There's a lot of ways to do marketing and to do it relatively inexpensively and to automate it. And, I don't think you have to go out and hire a really expensive agency. I really don't think you do, to start growing more and faster and in a scalable way. But those are, so again, revenue engine choices can be made. And most companies are just not doing, they're just doing one thing. And they're not doing, particularly service businesses, they're playing that one note. You got to play a few notes to really grow.
Yeah, and that one note can be potentially can have maybe seasonality to it. It could be more affected by, economic trends or things like that. Like we have clients who are engineering, for example, and we see big trends and shifts in what's happening with the government and how much is being funded for cleanup efforts and how much is being, maybe and then you just have general economic turns too. So playing one note, you're not going to have any kind of diversification to sort of offset maybe some of those other things. Now, recessions are recessions, and maybe your business is just always going to be affected by a recession. But, what other ways, the more you can have other sales channels working for you, I imagine it has to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. So for example, if let's say you're running an automated LinkedIn campaign, we're living in the golden age of being able to target people pretty precisely. Facebook ads is crazy how granular you can get on targeting this. So you can get to the people that you want to get to these days, right? But if you're sending them a message that doesn't resonate with their needs, and it's a lot of messaging is problematic. We see it on LinkedIn all the time. Hi, my name's Bob, and I do these things. And you're like, I don't care, Bob. Tell me about my pain points. And so if Bob had approached me and said, if you have these specific pain points, I solve them uncommonly well. And he sends that to, 200 people that he's, let's say, in his target space, he should get some results. If that is effective messaging, if these are common problems, if they're vexing problems that people don't like to have, and they really will pay money to solve it, then Bob will have success. If not, then, Bob will struggle. So it has to, in talking to your own customers, can help you understand from their view, how did they see this problem? Because if you're using their language, their nuances, other people will relate to it, right? And even better is if I'm sending a note, let's say Bob sends me a note, not only do I solve these uncommonly well, see the attached case study where I solved it for someone just like you, in terms of same industry, same, whatever. Now Bob has even more credibility with me, right? I'm more likely to click on that message, look at the case study. I certainly would if I had the problem. I'd look at it and then if he gives me a call to action, hey, if this resonates, if this doesn't resonate, have a great day. If it resonates, here's my calendar link. Great. Hopefully he doesn't send me 86 more of those messages.
Yeah.
Maybe a few more, because, I'm not going to see every message. I sometimes go through them quick. Send a few, make sure you maximize your chances, but definitely don't send 86 in a series.
Yes. Yeah. I'm personally very anti any kind of cold outreach, but it does work for some people, and when you do it well, it can be effective. And you don't need 200 yeses. You might need 3 yeses to make, the sales targets that you have. So, just thinking about that strategically.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious about like what metrics you care about when you're
Yeah.
looking at revenue, besides just like top line revenue number. I'm sure that's like
Hmm.
the number one, but what are some
Yeah.
other like revenue KPIs that you like to track for
Sure.
clients?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually wanted to touch on your last comment because it's a good one. Um, doing an insane amount of cold outreach that's very generic is bad for a bunch of reasons. You're absolutely right. I mean, I would say the ideal thing, and this depends on how well you know your audience, is if you can curate, let's say, a list of 200 like super, super ideal prospects, and then write, let's say, 5 of them a day, a customized note that that involves some research about them and their company or individually. That's ideal.
Yeah.
That is the mother of all great outreach, right? um, but some people don't, it's hard for them to curate a list of super ideal. And but you may, I think it's not a bad idea to start doing some really customized outreach to what you think your ideal audience is, to see if you can start getting some results, after like a few weeks of doing, like, let's say, 5 a day. um, and then if you start getting messaging that you think is really working, then you can scale it. It might make sense to scale it. So that would be the other comment I wanted to make. And then, so you asked about KPIs. So I think of everything as a sales funnel or a pipeline. So the sales funnel, my KPIs sort of start at the top and then work their way down, right? So sometimes it starts with, if you are doing, if you do have a revenue engine, like, let's say, how many ads am I putting out per week, right? So that would be an activity-based metric. And then how many leads is that generating? A results-based metric. And then how many meetings is that generating? And then how many, actually are a good fit that I'm going to have another meeting with or whatever. And then how many turn into closed won customers.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be other steps in there depending on how long your sales cycle is, how many conversations you typically need to have with someone before they close. I'm usually trying to compress that. So then another metric might be how long, how many days from the lead to closed won, how many meetings. And then I'll experiment. Hey, is there anything I can do to shorten the sales cycle, number of days, or reduce the number of meetings I have to get a closed one? And then from lead to closed one is one conversion rate. From lead to conversation or meeting is another metric. So what's the ratio? What's the percentage of leads that turn into meetings? What's the percentage of meetings that turn into closed one? Or if there's more stages, what's the conversion at each stage? But basically, if you have a sales conversation and then you see how many of those you close, that is a sales conversion metric, right? So in each industry, there's actually an average for what percent people close. You want to make sure that you have a decent close rate. Now, I could tell you across industries, it's about 20%. You should look at your own industry, but if you're
qualified lead
conversation to close one,
okay.
Yeah, so if you're closing 5% of qualified leads, you probably need to work on your sales skills. If you're closing more than 20%, you're probably fine. If you're still not growing fast enough, you probably just need to work on the other things.
Or if you're closing too much, then maybe like your price is too low, or you're like having
too
favorable terms or something.
That's great. 100%. Yeah, that's a great point. So this is the way that you could how you could actually take that data and then make it actionable. Like, okay, how do I know what I need to work on? I'm not just looking at a dashboard. What is this really telling me? Well, these are the kinds of things you should look for, because if you're saying at the end of the day, this is how much revenue is being spit out, which is another metric, right, that you look at. If the revenue is not what we want, you can actually go back up through those percentages and say, okay, I need 20% more leads. All other things being equal, if you need 20% more revenue, then you need 20% more leads. If we're not changing anything else in the funnel, right? And so you say, then the question is, how do I get 20% more leads? Right?
Yeah. And
simple math.
Back to so you can kind of identify different points in the funnel with the metrics that then might indicate, oh, we need to work on our sales skills. Maybe marketing's doing all the right things. It's our sales skills. Or maybe it's really the qualified leads coming in are really poor. Like, we have a ton of leads, but they're pretty poor. So you can kind of pinpoint. And that's why we track metrics, people.
It is.
Is so like we can start to say like, okay, here's a number, but like we don't just track numbers for the fun of it. We track numbers because they give us indicators of something happening that's going well in the business or not going well. So do you have any pipeline, like when we're talking maybe more like business development pipeline type metrics?
Other than what we talked about, you mean
I mean,
like
we've got like sales funnel. I'm thinking more kind of for like long-term contracts, maybe longer discussions with clients, like something. I'm thinking more on the service-based business side, like for either, proposals outstanding or, anything from that side.
Yeah, well, you know what? Actually, I'll tell you one that I neglected to mention that's really important. But for your question, I would say, if you have a lot more stages in between a lead and closed one than I mentioned, and certainly there are, I just didn't want to complicate it. But if you have like, oh, how many did I get proposals to? That's just another stage in there, and that will have a conversion percentage, and so that's more of the same. And it's great if you are tracking all those things, and it's not a huge burden to do that. I would, and then you could again figure out what you need in order to get where you want to go. But the other really important metric is revenue expansion. And this certainly applies to service industries, which is, okay, I have a customer and they're generating, I don't know, $10,000 a month, let's say. If there's a possibility, like how big do I think this customer could get? Based on their size and all that, in other words, what's the opportunity? Well, I think they could be a $30,000 a month customer, but they're only 10. Okay. We should have that is absolutely something we should track, is how much opportunity each customer for expansion. And, you may have to guess at it or, have more conversations with the customer. But once you've identified that there's room for growth, then that should be a consistent thing that we attempt to do, is how do we upsell them? How do we get more revenue? And of course, obviously deliver a lot more value. And then once we identify there's an opportunity, then we have to then go through the sales process of how do we communicate that, sure, they're going to pay me $20,000 a month more than they're paying me now, but I'm going to deliver, this much more value that's like many times the $20,000 that they're going to pay me, that incremental that they're going to pay me, right? Yeah. So that's another really important one that a lot of businesses don't track and should, because it's the easiest place to get revenue.
Yeah. A customer that's already acquired is the easiest one to get the next dollar from.
And it's the easiest and the cheapest.
Yes. That money has already been spent. Yeah. Oh gosh, this is so good. It's really helpful. Thank you. I feel like we are kind of running low on time though. Okay. I really appreciate all of this, and I hope everybody listening is really thinking about like your sales process or your sales function in your business and how it works with marketing, and thinking about some of these ideas, because like my brain is already turning for like what we could be doing for Clara. So I thank you for that. So I have a last question before we go. I want to make sure that if anybody who wants to find you can find you, that you can go to boltt.io. So basically Boltt with 2 T's.io. And you can check out his website. And then the last question that I have for you before we go is, do you have a favorite business book? And if so, could you share it with us?
I do. And I, like we were saying earlier, I don't even know if it's considered a business book per se. I think it is. I think it's one of the best business books.
A lot of entrepreneurs seem to be reading it.
Yeah. It's called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. And so it's available on all the formats. There we go.
And I think
she's a reader. That's why she's doing so well. She's a reader.
I'm just impressing people. I actually don't have that many books behind me, but I wish I could say I've actually read all the books behind me, but all of them are in progress.
Hey, well, that's a good
person
start.
That starts books and doesn't always finish them. But I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and it's also very lovely to listen to.
Yeah. It's incredibly helpful to me, because I'm always shocked at how many things I'm doing that are just not that important. And it shocks me when I really take inventory. And that's what he's there to do. He's there to say, you need to really look at what you're doing and eliminate the things that aren't important, because very a very small percentage of the things we're all doing are really that important.
Yes. And we fill our lives with all sorts of noise all the time.
100%.
I'm also listening to Cal Newport's Slow Productivity right now. So that's a kind of a similar concept of like, we're always kind of frenetic and running around and doing all these things and on Slack and in our Outlook and, doing this and doing that. But like, we're not kind of giving ourselves space to do the things that are actually really important or actually really need our creative energy. Yeah, I'd say this is a business book for sure, but it certainly seems to be very impactful for entrepreneurs because we are always being pulled by a lot of different priorities, for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sanjit, is there any other place that you hang out? Like, are you on LinkedIn? Do you like to connect with people there or?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. And through my LinkedIn or my website, people can book a call, a 1 hour call, no cost. We dive right into their business and we kind of start blueprinting what are the challenges they're having. And sometimes that's enough to get them going. And sometimes they need more help. Yeah. And it might make sense for us to, work together. But that's a really, I think, a great value for people. And it's a lot of fun to do them the 1 hours because, people, particularly smaller businesses, can get what they need and be off and running.
Yeah. Well, that's very generous of you. Well, yes, definitely reach out. And for anybody who's listening that wants to reach out, we also put the resources in the show notes as well. So, Sanjit, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.